So, welcome back to Advice for Grad Students, or what I wish I knew when I was a first or second year grad student. I'm your host, Phil Haun. I'm a grad of the MIT Security Studies program, and I have with me Rachel Tecott, who is also a grad of 2021. She also happens to be a friend and colleague from the Naval War College, and so I'll give a joint disclaimer that the views expressed here today are that of the speakers and not of the Department of Defense or its services. So welcome, Rachel, to Advice for Grad Students.
Thanks, it's great to be here.
Okay, great. So the topic today is on article submission process, this mysterious thing about taking your work and getting it published in journals. And so the first question I have is, what made you interested in this topic of the list that I gave you? Why did you choose this topic?
Sure. Well, mostly because I am knee deep in two R&Rs right at this very moment. R&Rs revise and resubmit. So it is very much front of mind. And I also think it was something that as a grad student, I had absolutely no clue. I did not know what that process looked like at all. So I'm eager to help demystify it.
Okay, so let's get into it. What advice do you have on the article submission process?
I think before getting into advice, one thing that would be helpful is just laying out what the process is, what the steps are, what the mechanics are of the long, arduous submission, revise and resubmit process. So I'll just really quickly just kind of run through those mechanics. So of course, step one is you're writing your article. Maybe it's a slice of your dissertation. Maybe you're trying to publish your second year paper. Maybe it's a side project. And you have to start by keeping a journal, a particular journal in mind. Where do I think this would be a good fit, substantively, empirically, research methodology wise? And then you start tailoring your article to that journal in advance of submission. So you've got to review their submission guidelines. So, okay, you've done the writing process. Next is the submission process. So something I didn't know about the submission process is you're not just submitting an article, you're also submitting a cover letter to the journal editors where you pitch the article, you summarize it, you say, you say why it's an important contribution, and you also say why it's a good fit for the journal. And you also have to go through their online system. There are lots of nuts and bolts in the mechanics of the submission process. You will be asked things like, who would you recommend as a reviewer? Is there anyone you don't want to review your article? There's a lot of packaging around the submission process that I didn't know of when I was a graduate student. And these vary from journal to journal. And you'll basically go to the journal website and follow the prompts through the submission process. Okay, step three, wait. You wait and you wait and you wait. After you submit, you're going to wait months before you hear anything, likely. So what's happening behind the scenes while you're waiting is the editors are, well, first they're deciding whether they're going to desk reject you or tip you out for external review. If you get desk rejected, well, the benefit of that is you at least hear quickly and you can start repackaging, reworking for submission elsewhere. But while you're waiting, if you're not desk rejected, what's happening is the editors are trying to figure out who they can get this article reviewed by, sending it out to them, giving them lots of time with the review. And then eventually the reviewers send it back to the editors, and the editors then have a decision to make. The editors can decide whether they want to, whether if the reviewers recommend resubmit, the editors can send you a resubmission notice. They could also decide to make a call that goes against what reviewers ask. Editors are the arbiters. So reviewer feedback is just one part of it. Okay, so after your waiting process, finally, step four, you hear back. You could hear back reject, in which case on to the next, but incorporate the feedback. You could hear back you're accepted, either unconditionally or with a few tweaks, or you could hear back that you've been asked to revise and resubmit. So step five, sleep on it. Give yourself a second to breathe, because you just worked so hard to submit this article and you thought it was pretty close to perfect because you submitted it, and you're going to receive a torrent of feedback about how to entirely rework large portions of the article. So you might want to just take a second to sit and breathe before moving on to, okay, getting to work on your R&R. The most important thing to know about the R&R process that I did not know is you're not just revising your manuscript, you're also writing a very important revise and resubmit memo. And the revise and resubmit memo is essentially a long document, or if you don't work in documents, whatever you work in, where you go through every single piece of reviewer feedback and you talk about how you address it. And I can, okay, so then, okay, you've done all that, then finally you submit, and then you wait again, and then you eventually hear back. So I'll stop there with the spiel of what the process is and kick it back to Phil.
Okay, well, one of the things I loved about what you said is reject and go on to the next. So tell us, having never ever had an article rejected in my life, I'm asking you, how do you handle the rejection? And those who sense the sarcasm, I have had plenty of articles rejected on the desk or with the R&R. Anyway, so tell us about the rejection, because that can be a new experience.
Sure. I mean, I think the first thing to think about is, what can you learn from the rejection? The rejection is going to contain information for you. So you might want to, sit, sleep on it again, give yourself a minute, but then start mining the feedback that you get. This is valuable feedback for you to make your paper stronger for submission elsewhere. Maybe what you get from your reject is, okay, this actually is a great article, it's just not a fit for us, in which case find the journal that it is a better fit for. Or the reviewers might have flagged something that really needs some serious thought on your part. And before you resubmit elsewhere, you're going to really want to sit and incorporate that information. So it's a learning opportunity, and it's a way to make your work stronger.
Okay, great. So you kind of started with the article was written, but how do you incorporate other aspects of getting that article written, like conferences or later term papers and all? How do you go about constructing those different feedback mechanisms to have it ready for submission?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the hardest things to figure out is, when is your article ready for submission? At what point do you pull the trigger and hit submit? Because nothing is ever perfect, nothing is ever done in that sense. And so knowing when you've hit diminishing returns on feedback is something that is a pretty pivotal part of the process. So for me, I've often thought, if I've workshopped this paper through different, through MIT, if I've workshopped it at another university, if I've workshopped it at APSA, if I've workshopped it through different places, and the feedback I'm getting is starting to be the same, and I've implemented what I can, and I'm not learning new things when I get additional feedback, that to me is my signal that it's time to hit the submit button.
Okay, and then I've looked at your CV. As with all rising academics, you have a nice pipeline. The question I have is prioritizing between different articles and so that synthesis to make sure that you're progressing. What's your process as far as the submission and the resubmit?
So I'm developing my process as a junior scholar who only recently was sitting in the shoes of the graduate students that these videos are for. But I think what the most important thing that I've learned is about sequencing projects. So I like to, at a given time, have a couple projects that are really either in R&R, I've submitted them already to a journal and I'm in the waiting period, or I'm just about to submit them. So those close to done projects that are close to that process. Then I like to have a couple projects that they're in drafting phase. The research is mostly done, and I'm getting to a point where I think in the not too distant future, I'll be ready to submit. And then I have a few projects that I'm really still developing and in the research phase. And the reason that's so important is because you have to wait so long in the review process that you don't want to just twiddle your thumbs once you've submitted something. You want to immediately kind of turn to your other projects to keep moving the ball on those while you're waiting to hear back.
Okay. And then I have one final question, which is, you haven't been submitting as long as I have, so you probably haven't made as many mistakes as I have in the submission process. But can you think of a failure early on and what you learned from it going forward that you would give as this final advice to grad students?
Stand your ground. And what I mean by that is, there will be feedback that you'll hear that you'll think, you know what, absolutely, my paper will be better if I take that on, and if I change the product accordingly. But then there are going to be some things where you're going to be pushed in a direction that you disagree with, that you think, you know what, actually, I need to explain why it is that I need to stick with this and defend my argument and explain why that's not something you want to change, given the direction that you've received. So in the beginning, I think I was a little bit too, how do I please this editor? What can I do to make sure that they like it? As opposed to, what can I do to make sure that this work is as strong as it can be? And if that means, respectfully disagreeing and then explaining why you're going to push in that direction, then that's a really important part of the process too.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the advice. I'm sure when I go back and watch this, I'm going to get a lot out of it to help my process. Anyway, thank you very much, Rachel.
Thank you.